A quiet Monday morning in Minnesota was shattered by shocking violence. The date was June 16, 2025. The news spread quickly and with chilling effect. Two prominent state lawmakers and their spouses had been attacked in their own homes. The first incident targeted State Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette in Champlin. They were both wounded in an early morning shooting, but the horror did not end there. A short time later, another attack occurred in Brooklyn Park. This time, the target was Minnesota's top House Democrat, Melissa Hortman, and her husband Mark. Both were tragically killed in the assault. The community was left reeling from the brazen and calculated nature of these crimes. The initial reports were confusing and chaotic. Emergency services rushed to both scenes. Police immediately understood this was not a random act of violence. The attacks were coordinated. They were targeted. The assailant had specifically chosen powerful political figures as his victims. Law enforcement across the state mobilized, recognizing the immense threat. The public was warned to be on high alert. The motive seemed clear. This was a politically motivated attack meant to sow fear and disrupt the state's leadership. The violence against elected officials sent a wave of terror far beyond the Minneapolis suburbs, striking at the heart of Minnesota's democracy. The assailant's method was particularly disturbing. He reportedly posed as a police officer to gain entry to the homes. This disguise allowed him to get close to his victims without raising suspicion. He used deception to carry out his deadly plan. After the shootings, he fled, leaving behind a community gripped by fear and uncertainty. Local events were canceled as a precaution. Parents kept their children inside. The sense of safety that people felt in their quiet neighborhoods was completely destroyed. The attacks were not just on individuals, they were an assault on the peace and security of the entire state. The news of the attacks spread like wildfire. Across Minnesota and the nation, people watched in horror. Melissa Hortman was a respected and powerful figure in state politics. Senator John Hoffman was also a well-known public servant. The idea that they could be gunned down in their homes was almost unbelievable. It was an act of domestic terrorism aimed directly at the state's political system. The calculated nature of the attacks, from the disguise to the choice of targets, pointed to a deliberate and cold-blooded plan. The state was left to mourn its losses and grapple with the terrifying reality of what had just happened. A massive manhunt was launched immediately. Local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies joined forces. The FBI was called in to assist. An urgent alert was issued across the Midwest, warning that the suspect was armed and dangerous. The key piece of evidence left at one of the crime scenes was a vehicle. It was a law enforcement-style SUV, part of the suspect's disguise. Inside this vehicle, investigators found something that turned the case wide open. It was a target list. A notebook contained the names of other political figures, including Governor Tim Walz and Senator Amy Klobuchar. This confirmed the political motivation behind the attacks. The investigation quickly focused on one man, Vance Luther Boelter. He was 57 years old. His name became the center of the intense search. The FBI added Boelter to its most wanted list. They offered a $50,000 reward for any information that could lead to his arrest. His picture was broadcast across news channels and social media. Law enforcement worked tirelessly, following every lead and tracking his potential movements. They knew they had to find him before he could strike again. The list found in his vehicle suggested that the violence was far from over. The pressure to capture him was immense. The search led authorities to rural Minnesota. Investigators tracked Boelter to his farm in Green Isle, a small town southwest of the Twin Cities. A large police presence descended on the area. The community held its breath as officers closed in. After an intense and careful operation, Vance Luther Boelter was apprehended. He was taken into custody without further incident. The manhunt that had put the entire state on edge was finally over. A sense of relief washed over the public, but it was mixed with the deep sorrow of the day's events. The suspect was caught, but the damage was already done. With Boelter in custody, the immediate threat was neutralized. The focus of the investigation then shifted. Police worked to piece together his movements and confirm if he had any accomplices. They needed to understand the full scope of his plans. The arrest was a major breakthrough, but it was just the beginning of a long legal process. The evidence gathered from the fake police vehicle, including the target list and anti-Trump rally flyers, would be crucial in building the case against him. The capture of Vance Luther Boelter brought the manhunt to a close, but it opened a new chapter in this tragic story. So who is Vance Luther Boelter? The picture that emerged was complex and troubling. He was a 57-year-old man with a background that seemed respectable on the surface. He had a doctorate degree and once served on the governor's Workforce Development Board. In fact, he had served on that board alongside one of his victims, Senator John Hoffman. This connection suggested a personal and political grievance. Boelter had also founded his own security firm, claiming to have experience working abroad. He presented himself as a professional with expertise in security and management. This background made his alleged actions even more shocking. Beneath the professional veneer, there was a man with strong and seemingly extreme beliefs. Friends and acquaintances described him as deeply religious and politically conservative. He was a devout evangelical Christian who had expressed anti-abortion and anti-LGBTQ+ views. He was known to have attended Trump rallies. His political views appeared to be a driving force in his life. The target list found in his vehicle included not just Democratic politicians, but also abortion providers like Planned Parenthood. This suggested his motives were a toxic mix of political resentment and religious extremism. He seemed to view those he disagreed with as enemies. In the time leading up to the attacks, Boelter was reportedly facing personal struggles. His security business may have been failing, and he was said to be facing financial difficulties. He had recently started working low-wage jobs, a stark contrast to his previous managerial roles. This financial pressure could have added to his sense of anger and desperation. Just before the shootings, he sent a disturbing message to his roommates. The message suggested he was planning to leave and not come back. It was a foreboding sign of the violence that was to come. The evidence linking Boelter to the crime is significant. The fake police vehicle found at the scene was a critical link. The manifesto-style notebook with the target list provided a clear window into his alleged motives. His disguise as a police officer, possibly using a latex mask, showed a high level of planning. His background in security would have given him the knowledge to plan such an attack. As investigators continue to dig into his life, they are building a case that portrays him as a man radicalized by his beliefs and pushed to violence by his personal circumstances. The reaction from state leaders was swift and filled with grief and outrage. Governor Tim Walz condemned the shootings in the strongest possible terms. He called the attack on Melissa Hortman and her husband a politically motivated assassination. He spoke for a state in mourning, expressing his sorrow for the victims and their families. He also emphasized the need to protect public officials and stand against political violence. Senators Amy Klobuchar and Tina Smith, both of whom were on Boelter's alleged target list, increased their security and released statements calling for unity and condemning the hate that fueled the attack. The public response was one of shock and sadness. In St. Paul, a growing memorial of flowers and messages formed to honor Melissa Hortman and her husband. Vigils were held as communities came together to mourn and support one another. The attack pierced the sense of civic decency that Minnesotans pride themselves on. People from all political backgrounds expressed their horror at the violence. The incident served as a grim reminder of the rising political tensions in the country. It showed how extremist rhetoric can escalate into deadly action, turning political opponents into targets. Now that Vance Luther Boelter is in custody, the legal process will begin. He will face multiple serious charges, including murder and attempted murder. Prosecutors will present the evidence gathered during the investigation, including the target list and witness testimonies. The case will likely be one of the most high-profile trials in Minnesota's history. The court proceedings will be watched closely by a nation grappling with the threat of political violence. The outcome will determine Boelter's fate, but the scars left on the community will take much longer to heal. The pursuit of justice is the next step for a state trying to make sense of a senseless tragedy. The investigation is not over. Authorities will continue to explore Boelter's life, his connections, and his motivations. They will seek to determine if he acted alone or if he was part of a larger network. They caution against jumping to conclusions, but the evidence points towards a man driven by a dangerous ideology. For the people of Minnesota, the road ahead is long. They must mourn their losses, support the survivors, and confront the difficult questions this attack has raised. The hope is that from this tragedy, there can be a renewed commitment to civility, dialogue, and peace in the political arena.